All right. Vivek Ramaswamy got interviewed on Steven Crowder's show, Louder with Crowder, and it ended up being like a pretty fiery debate, apparently. So I'm really interested in seeing this. I have not seen anything from Steven Crowder in quite a while, just because I have stopped watching him for a variety of reasons. I don't think he's the most good faith guy in the right wing. Kind of turned me off the more I've listened to him. I feel like he's slightly too extreme for my tastes, and he's not the most dishonest guy on the right. Even though I think that like I used to like some of the things that he did, nowadays that they're just better people to watch. I watch like Tim Pool now instead. But anyway, Tim Pool and Destiny basically, I watch them. But anyways, let's get into this.
Why the hell am I the only person in the Republican Party who has the guts to say English should be our national language?
I know.
Why am I the only person who can actually offer legal argument for why we should be able to end birthright citizenship without a constitutional amendment? And so the irony to me is
I can answer that.
Yeah.
It's because of the color of your skin. And I don't mean that, I'm saying you are inoculated. You know, for someone who looks like he's straight from
I disagree with that. I'm going to be back at you, Steve. I'm going to hit you hard for that. That is because the rest of you are freaking lazy.
The flying V himself, Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek! Vivek, always glad to have you. Can you hear me, see me, sir?
I can. Vivek Ramaswamy. It's just the usual spelling. You know?
I don't care.
Standard.
The reason why
I think it's because I'm Indian.
Yes, that's exactly right. That is absolutely right. By the way, I do appreciate, though, that you have a studio where we can see you, and it's not a blue shirt on a blue background.
That is cool.
Where you look like the floating Homer head in the Japanese commercials. This looks...
It only took me a year of running for president to figure some of these things out.
Yes, that's true.
Put that at the top of the learnings from the last year.
And before we cover this, look, this interview, of course, has picked up steam. Where's the best place for people to go to the original source and watch it? What you have put out there to the public?
Apple, Spotify, YouTube, name it. But those three, wherever you get your podcasts, as they say, go get it. The funny thing is, this was supposed to be the relaunch of a podcast I started during the presidential campaign. And the whole point for me is, and this is a point in the campaign, and this was part of, I took a little bit of a break, now I just relaunched this podcast, is to start to have the kinds of debates, even within the right, that we don't actually have, intellectual debates. And so I thought a fun one to start with is, there's the N-word, and you're not supposed to say it. Nationalism is what I'm referring to.
I was like, what? It was like, you know what? I want to have some intellectual debate. So let's start off with the N-word. You know how you're not supposed to say that? And I'm like, what?
There's the N-word, and you're not supposed to say it. Nationalism is what I'm referring to.
Oh,
and I think that
you caught me. I thought he's not going to say the N-word. Indians don't have a hood pass.
Nationalism. No, an Indian can absolutely say nationalism. Yes. Non-white nationalist is what some have called me. But I think that was an interesting discussion about what it means to be a nationalist. And so I thought, let's get somebody who has actually thought deeply about this. Right. And Ann Coulter's on that list. And so this is the first episode of the relaunched podcast I kind of started during the presidential campaign. And what do you know? She starts with a wake-up call, a dose of coffee, but she was honest, saying she couldn't have voted for me even though she agreed with everything I said because I'm an Indian, which I thought set up for actually a really interesting conversation.
That was insane. I did hear about that. Actually, I think I actually put that in my React requests thing. I plan on reacting to that at some point. But I feel like that's like a racist thing to say. Is it controversial for me to say that it's racist to be like, I'm not going to vote for someone because it's Indian? Now, to be fair, I actually think the reason why Vivek Ramaswamy did not win the nomination was because of the color of his skin, unfortunately. I think there were a lot of people who, whether or not they were willing to admit it or whether or not they recognized it within themselves, they were like, ooh, you've got this brown guy here with like a first and last name that I've never heard before. And he's rich. And you know what? I don't know if I trust him. Let me go with like the white guy with the worst worst policies in the stilted personality. Like that's what a lot of people in the Republican Party were doing, unfortunately. And it's a shame. I kind of wish that there was less casual racism in the Republican Party. And I'm sure that the majority of it was unintentional, but I just wish there was less of it. So that people would look at this more objectively and realize that, hey, actually, if you look at it just on paper, Vivek Ramaswamy was the best candidate that the GOP could have had. And I don't know if he could have beaten Donald Trump, but he certainly could have cleared the board of everyone else. And it could have just been Trump versus Vivek. And that would have been a fascinating battle for the nomination title to observe.
I'd like to roll one clip. So if you can say the N-word nationalist, I guess that would make members of Congress House nationalists. So we're running down that trail here. I want to show this clip because I think it's okay. It's not running for president.
That's really funny.
I said the only thing is, I mean, members of the House, they're actually not. Actually, most people are very afraid of the word nationalist, right? So if only we could have gotten there, that might have been interesting.
No, you're right.
You're
right. It's the actual people on the ground out there doing the work who are nationalists, field nationalists. So the point that I wanted to discuss here is you made and I think that I agree with you. I agree with almost everything that you both said, but
now I remember why I used to watch this dude. He's actually pretty funny.
I'd like to give you the chance to clarify this because I think that some wires have gotten crossed with people who watch this. You talked about how the right shouldn't be reactionary, and then let me just take a moment to explain what my perspective is on it, and then give you the floor. So let's run the clip here really quickly.
We might have even in what I may call our wing, if I may take that liberty of the future.
You gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. You've gotta be kidding me. You 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 gotta be kidding me. This is awful. So I open up this can and it just like explodes everywhere. Like, oh man. This is bad. So like, it's literally on. I don't know how well you can tell in the light. No, you guys probably can't tell in the light. But like, it's like on my pants. Like this sucks. This is bad. Like it's because it's dark. You can't really see as well. But it's like, it's also like on the chair. I promise it's not what it looks like. This is Sprite, okay? Or not Sprite, Pepsi. It's Pepsi, I promise. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to change my clothes after this. Oh man, that's so annoying. But anyways, let's get back to this.
Right. What my perspective is on it, and then give you the floor. So let's run the clip here really quickly.
We might have even in what I may call our wing, if I may take that liberty of the future conservative movement, one that is accidentally defined by the threat we're reacting to, rather than affirmatively defined on our own terms, right? Individual, family, nation, and God, serving as the alternative vision to race, gender, sexuality, and climate. And I think it's a hard thing to do. My definition of American identity has nothing to do with what that person has to say. It's going to be independent and stand regardless of it. And I just worry, we've had such a candid conversation, and I'll just close in candor. I worry that a little bit of even a deep, thoughtful, philosophically grounded and committed person like your vision of our national identity may itself be in part a projection of a response guided by people who hate this country, who should have nothing to do with defining what a person like you believes it means to be a citizen of this nation.
Okay, so really quickly, my perspective here, and we're going to have Alex Rosen on, one of the original, predator poachers, which has now unfortunately been copycatted by other people looking for social media clout. I agree with the idea that you shouldn't give more credence, for example, reacting to some crazy blue-haired person who has no influence, right? Though it's funny. I think, though, this idea of not being reactionary, I don't see conservatism or pushing back as reactionary. I see it as a reaffirming of the Constitution, right, and the Bill of Rights. And I would agree with you if we didn't have to deal with the fact that these people who are radical leftists, the entire DNC, are in positions of power in all of our established institutions. And so sometimes I will see people say, well, why are you being reactionary? Well, no, hold on a second. I'm bringing people back to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, to which you were reactionary in the 1960s. It was always that. You changed it, and now you have states with abortion up until 9 months and after birth. So I sometimes have an issue with, or I should say that I'm reticent to go with the premise, because then people box you in where one side is only talking about ideas and the other side is shooting arrows at them.
Yeah, so I do believe with you, and I think there's only.
By the way, I will say that I think a lot of people are called like reactionary when they're responding to something. And of course, you know, if you're reacting to something, you're reacting. That doesn't mean you're reactionary. If you're reactionary, then basically that means that everything that you're doing is in relation to the actions of someone else. And that is completely different. And I don't think that I don't know. I hate saying mainstream conservatism because I feel like the majority of the GOP isn't conservative anymore. But if you look at conservatives in general, like real conservatives, they're not reactionary. They're not just jerking in the opposite direction of whatever the Democrats are doing. They're responding appropriately to what they see in the culture and what they see from our governments. And a lot of times, it's in opposition to what they're doing, but not always, right? If Joe Biden says something that makes sense, then they'll be like, yeah, rare Joe Biden W. If they see Trump say something that doesn't make sense, they'll be like, oh, man, rare Trump L. But they're not going to be just like they're not going to be like bizarro world, Democrats just doing the opposite of whatever a Democrat would do.
Presidential candidate to actually say this, that we are in the middle of a war in this country.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think to win a war, you have to both know who you're defeating and what you're fighting for. Okay. Sure. And so the conversation, let's just understand who you're talking to here. I mean, I've started businesses to compete head on.
Of course.
With BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. I wrote the book Woke Inc. before anybody in this country, certainly on the right, had heard the word woke. So I do think it's important. And I say this as a matter of self-reflection, Steve, is that I have been reactionary for much of the last 4 years. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so long as it doesn't blind you from actually remembering what you're fighting for. Right. And that came up in the conversation with Ann Coulter because I think she said something that in her heart of heart, she probably, at least a version of her from before, wouldn't actually believe in, but for the current environment in this country, which is that she couldn't vote for me because of my ethnic heritage. I think that the thing I challenged her with is to say that, you know what, if we didn't have open border policies in this country, if we had a rational immigration policy like the one you just described, and I agree with you wholeheartedly in that last monologue, if we didn't have self-hatred permeating every institution in this country, from our universities to our capital markets to corporate America to our media, if we actually had a revival of national pride in this country, if English was the sole national language in this country, if we actually ended birthright citizenship for the people who broke the law to come here illegally to have anchor babies, against that backdrop, I don't think Ann Coulter would tell me to my face, I don't think she would even believe it, that she couldn't vote for me because I was of Indian heritage. And so what that has done, I believe, and I think it's beginning to happen, and I think this is the stuff of how nations end, is that the reactionary impulse takes over the very thing you were going to fight for in the first place. And I think that's where we actually err, not because there's some other noble external standard to be measured against, but because we fail to fight for the very thing we cared about getting into this arena for in the first place.
Right.
I mean, why the heck did I run for president? Why are you doing what you're doing? Why am I doing, why on earth am I starting a podcast right now? I don't need to make more money. I don't need a business. But I'm doing it because I think we need to have certain conversations, especially on the right, that we're not having. And one of those conversations, and I think it's relevant this year in particular, I think the reason we didn't have a red wave in 2022 is not because of abortion. It's not because of Donald Trump. It's because Republicans fell into this trap, criticizing the radical Biden agenda. And I've done that, you've done that, but it gets stale after a while, really. I mean, Biden gives us an endless list of things to criticize. We did not have an alternative vision that we actually stand for. I'm not talking about metaphysics and philosophy. I'm talking about actual affirmative policies that we stand for. Standing for merit, standing for free speech, standing for the rule of law, standing for actually making sure the people, bureaucrats we never elected, aren't the ones running government. That's a vision. Those are things to stand for. But sitting around criticizing the radical Biden agenda or the progressives on their own terms is fine. It's important. It's necessary. But we can't do it at the expense of forgetting what we're fighting for. And I think that's the mistake that Ann may have made, though I respect a lot of what she said.
Sure.
I think she's a thoughtful person. I think that may have clouded her own judgment, which is what I sort of called her out in the little exchange that we had on my podcast.
Well, I mean, if she's saying that she wouldn't vote for Vivek Ramaswamy as an Indian, like how, because he's an Indian, like how thoughtful of a person is she really?
I agree with you on that. I mean, we're about to have Alex Rosen on. I don't know if you saw this. Bradley Martin and Vitali, they did this thing where they tried to confront a pedophile, right? And the problem is they did it in a way where it may let this pedophile off scot-free, whereas Alex Rosen, who we've worked with, has put hundreds of them behind bars by doing his due diligence. And the different approach, and I will sort of personalize this, for example, I was just a comedian and actor until YouTube, where I had, for example, very familiar, the blue bed sheet behind me back in 2008, 2009, where I would hear my friends saying, assault weapons, assault weapons, assault weapons. And I thought, wait a second, they don't even know what that means. So I can use these tools at my disposal now, social media, YouTube was new, to do a top 5 myths about the assault weapons ban. Use the tool to draw attention to an important issue. Versus right now, someone just going, look, slow-mo shot on a gun range by a woman with large breasts. It's like, well, if your only goal is clout and attention, this is no longer a tool. The end game is attention. The end game is controversy as opposed to using it as a tool. But I do think it's very necessary to cut through. In other words, if there was no reaction at all, I mean, we were just watching CNN all day for the last several days. It's been about the political persecution of Donald Trump and these sham trials, but then taking it to, like what you said, concrete policies. I really like what you just said about a national language, because I'm going to pull a Coulter here a little bit. I think you would agree with me, because you both mentioned that people from different countries tend to, I use the term ghettoize, create these enclaves where they don't associate. And I will tell you, in Texas, that has happened with a lot of Indian immigrants. Now, I don't mean as far as crime, I don't mean as far as not paying taxes, but as far as many not speaking English and whole neighborhoods where it is entirely Indian, including Indian markets, where you will go as an American and say, this doesn't feel like the United States of America anymore. Have you noticed that with this wave of obviously a record number of Indian immigrants?
I don't know. I think I don't know if he's wading into racist waters here, but to me, feeling like American anymore is more of like a cultural thing, right? It's like the clothes you wear, the music you listen to, the way that the buildings are constructed, the cars you drive, the way you carry yourself, is not, to me, it takes a lot for me to be like, this doesn't feel like America anymore. I think the only times where I've had an interaction out in public with someone, and I was like, and by the way, I live in a relatively diverse area, but, the only time that I have ever like been out in public and interacted with people, and I was like, this doesn't feel like an American interaction, is when like, I don't know, like a Japanese woman like takes my order at a counter and then she bows at the end. Like, that's the only time that I've ever been like, it's not like really an American thing to do. Like, I don't know if Steven Crowder is getting this impression just because he's interacting with people and the skin color is different, or there's like no white people at all around, which I could definitely understand being like, that's interesting, but that doesn't mean, this doesn't feel like America. Or people speaking like a foreign language. Like there's I've gone to like thrift stores before where you'll hear a lot of people around you just like speaking like Spanish or any other foreign language. And that doesn't necessarily make me feel like I'm not in America, because people in America speak other languages. Now, I do agree on the policy, right, that America probably should have, English as like a standard, like an official language. And as part of the American test to become a citizen, you probably should be able to understand like some rudimentary, English phrases like, I don't know, like, where is the closest Starbucks? Or can you give me a ride to the airport, or something like that? Like very basic stuff to like get around. I think that probably is important, because you don't want people to come into the country and then just like get stuck in these enclaves. You would hopefully want new citizens to come in and interact with all of the other citizens that you have in the United States. That is one thing that helps with assimilation, and I think it's a positive thing, rather than people just like forming these little pockets and then being all isolated.
To the United States for tech jobs, and is solving that a national language, like you said, English, starting with, you're like everybody else. You have to get in line and you have to follow here.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the peers who I'm next to, and this is just not a deflection of what you said, it's just true, is I feel like most people I'm surrounded by don't know how to speak English either. Well, I think a lot of immigrants don't know how to speak English. And I think that, as someone
I think he was talking about Republicans.
Tries to speak the language that was bequeathed to us, it's a deeper point. I'm not just offering that as a quip.
No, it's true.
I think a lot of you have a lot of self-hatred of this country from immigrants who travel to this country, who then are critical of this country, who then actually are taking advantage of this country without actually pledging allegiance to the flag. And then you got sixth and seventh generation of some girl of a guy who grew up on the Upper East Side, now moves to Brooklyn, thinks she's a hippie, and shows up at a Hamas protest and says the same thing. So I think that is a deeper issue in our country, where if we're just playing whack-a-mole. Look, no one's more hardline on illegal mass migration than me, and no one's more hardline in believing that the sole purpose of immigration policy in the United States needs to be to advance the interests of U.S. citizens who are already here, right? I hate reciting standard talking points. They bore me. But here's a fun one that nobody, I don't think, has cited, but it's a fact. 12% of the nation of Sierra Leone, 12%, country of 8 million people, talking about 950,000 people, have applied for a green card. So this isn't just the illegal migration issue. It's the source of magnitude of demand of, if we did have open borders, this is what's going to become of our country. But Steve, I think the thing that bothers me is, why the hell am I the only person in the Republican Party who has the guts to say English should be our national language?
I know.
Why am I the only person who can actually offer a legal argument for why we should be able to end birthright citizenship without a constitutional amendment? And so the irony to me is,
I can answer that.
Yeah.
It's because of the color of your skin. And I don't mean that, I'm saying you are inoculated. You know, for someone who looks like she's straight from the hip.
I disagree with that. I'm going to be back at you, Steve. I'm going to hit you hard for that. That is because the rest of you are freaking lazy. And
cowards.
The conservative movement has grown lazy. Cowards. People
yeah.
in this country have common sense. What we really lack is courage.
Yes.
So I'm not going to buy some BS that, like, my last name or my skin color insulates me. Think about it. I had to step down from my seal of
that's the perception.
I mean, I think no. I disagree. I think it kind of does. It does, but it does it among Republicans. So Republicans will write someone off like Vivek for his name or for his skin color, but they won't discount his ideas. They'll love his ideas, his policies. They'll be just like, I love Vivek Ramaswamy, but I don't know, something seems kind of off about him. Like, gee, I wonder what sets him apart from the other candidates. But when you get to a general election, you're gonna have a lot of Democrats who be like, oh, wait a second, we have a chance to elect the first ever Indian American president of the United States. Like, that's how some Democrats are looking at things. Or they'll be like, this guy seems reasonable. He's younger. He's got he may be balding, but he has no gray hair. So like, this might be a better person to vote for than Joe Biden, right? So there's that too. In a general election standpoint, it is a net positive to be non-white, but in the Republican context, it is a net negative to be non-white.
But other people won't criticize you.
But let's just level at this. We're having some fun here. I stepped down from my seat, a CEO of a company, multi-billion-dollar company that I founded, led as CEO, built it from scratch, wasn't born into money, and had a choice to do what every other biotech CEO was doing in the wake of George Floyd. Chose not to do it. Did not issue a statement in favor of BLM. Because saving this country involves some measure of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So to somebody, I get this from white friends all the time, good-hearted people. It's like, I love that you can say it because I can't. My answer is bullshit. You're just a coward. Stand up and actually say it.
Yep.
Stand for your actual convictions, because if you can't stand for your convictions, you don't have any at all.
But the issue is no one else does say it. Right, we say it on this show, right? And then we
Absolutely.
take the arrows. Let me give you a very clear example. I come from Quebec, and the reason I say this.
Take the arrows. Don't cry about it. Like, that's
No,
part
I'm
of
not crying about it. I'm saying as far as the Republican Party.
Yeah.
The Republican Party. Why aren't they
Exactly.
saying it? I am giving you your answer. That is the answer. It's white
Exactly.
guilt.
So-
It's not.
so we need to
It's
no
their
longer be
white
cowards.
guilt. Hold on, let me finish here. This is important. In Quebec, and this goes to Ann Coulter's point, the only people who feel they can't say it because they've been told they can't say it are WASPs in this country. Quebec, they created language laws. They had the language police to enforce it. And by the way, this was copied across the world. This was copied across the world. They said, oh, wow, we can do this because we want to preserve a culture, French, namely French-European culture, right, Acadian culture in Quebec. And they created these language laws, which, by the way, were discriminatory against English-speaking Canadians. No one has a problem with it anywhere else except in white United States of America because they've been told they can't. Now, I don't subscribe to that, but I will tell you this. My frustration is everyone in the Republican Party, save for you and maybe Donald Trump, it's a white guilt thing. They feel they can't say English because people say, do you mean white? And they go, no. And they're pussies.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to know what the one nation is that's
True.
spoken in other countries? Lone language is spoken in India. It's English.
Yeah.
So why do we worry about that in the United States of America when actually that creates coherence in our nation? And so here's what I'll say is no excuses for anybody anymore. If you have your own convictions, speak your mind in the open, actually start standing for it. Don't assume it's somebody else's responsibility, and don't make excuses for yourself for not doing it either. Now, I'm going to make 2 points here relating to ethnic pride and nationalism. Look, I think it's weird that every other ethnicity other than the white ethnicity can take pride in their ethnic heritage. But if white people or people of a WASP variety or whatever take just pride, not denigration of anybody else, but pride in their own ethnic heritage,
Sure.
that's deemed racist. I think that's
No. Well, ethnic pride is stupid. Ethnic pride is entirely stupid. It's like, man, I sure am glad that my skin ended up being the way it is. Like, that has nothing to do with you. You cannot attribute to yourself the successes of other people with your same ethnicity just by virtue of being birthed in the same lineage, right? It's no, you don't have bragging rights for being a certain skin color. So to take pride in something that has almost nothing to do with you, right? Like as a human being has nothing to. I mean, I think it's kind of silly. I think it's kind of silly in my opinion. So, and of course, it's going to be very controversial to be like, even if you're not white, even if it just doesn't make sense to, use your skin color as part of your identity. But it's like, I don't know. There are a lot of black people who are in this country. They're not all the same. There are a lot of white people in this country who are like all not the same as well. And so since they're not a monolith, and being black or white or Indian or whatever is not indicative of the type of person that you are, I don't understand why you would use that as an identifier. You should use things as an identifier that have things to do with who you are as an individual and that actually describe you as a person. I'm a Christian. I would rather be identified by that. I like listening to hyperpop. I would rather be identified by that. I listen to Christian rap. I'd rather be identified by that. I like technology. I like playing video games. I'd rather be identified by things that like either are my beliefs or things that I do than things that I had no influence or control over, because that makes more sense. Like you might as well have pride over your astrological sign, right? That makes the same amount of sense as having pride over your ethnicity.
It's weird, but I think it's insufficient to just stop there. I think what we're actually missing is why doesn't everybody actually start taking pride in the American civic heritage, right? So this is the way I don't want to see us go. I think it's great. The reactionary point is to make an observation that's true. It's super bizarre and weird and hypocritical and illogical and inconsistent for every ethnicity except for one subset of ethnicities based on the shade of your tan, which if it's light, a shade of your tan, you can't actually take pride in your own ethnic heritage. Now, I think that's weird, and I think it's wrong. But then if we go the direction of just letting that reaction guide us and say, yeah, I want white pride, and somebody else says, I want black pride,
right.
Actually, we're missing the whole point, which is we should have a shared conviction in American pride, which is what we've lost. And so that's, I think, what I see in the
Which is another thing, too, is that is, a belief system. You choose to participate in America. Right, you choose to go along with the laws, follow the laws, and support America. Say that America's a good thing. Like, it's fine to have American be your identity. Excuse me, because you could leave America if you wanted to. Right? We're not like Cuba. You could leave if you want to. So, is Cuba or Venezuela one of the countries that we're embargoed? I don't know. But like, you can leave America if you want to. So it makes sense to have that be a part of your identity because you are willingly here, right? So that is different than, and that's a different type of nationalism too, than this like sort of like ethnic nationalism that people like to support. Now, I will say, I think even nationalism is dangerous because I think it unhealthily props up the government as a source of good and causes citizens to look up to the government in a way that they really shouldn't. But it's certainly better than like ethnocentric nationalism, which is what some people are trying to prop up and support.
Conservative movement right now, Stephen, is I think the left, say what you will about them, they will offer a coherent vision, right? There's oppressors and oppressed. They're good at offering a state of emergency, whether it's the end of COVID-19 or climate change. If you don't get it right by then, we're done. And we have fallen into the trap of just stopping. We need some of this to light the spark. It's a means to an end, as you said. But we fall into the trap of just making this as an end in ourselves to play whack-a-mole against the other side versus remembering what we're fighting for. And it's what's represented by that flag behind you and the flag behind me.
Yes.
And I think that conservative movement has grown lazy. And unless we learn from that, I worry we're going to have the red wave that never came in 2024, just like we did in 2022. And that's not up to the left. That's up to us. And I think that's something we haven't yet done.
Yeah, I completely agree with when you talk about the reactionary right, to be clear, people who actually say we should only have white migrants. So to give you an example, I would take 20 Cuban migrants here who are actually fleeing, right, a persecutive government versus one Swedish socialist. But here, let me give you the issue here that I think a lot of people on the right are missing. I'll just start spouting off some titles here. The American History of White Supremacy, Patriarchy and the Establishment of Western Civilization. I've just named you Ivy League courses where we used to say pride in the American ideals, and every single major school and media outlet these kids are being bombarded with. That flag means white supremacy, guys. The Constitution, bunch of white guys, and so that's why people feel the need to say, hold on, it's not because it's white, but also they weren't bad because they were white. And they spend too much time on it. But the left says American ideals are bad because of white. That's what they say. And it's unfortunate.
The left's narrative is garbage here on this. But I think that here, I'll just give you an example in closing. And this is why I'm bothering to relaunch this podcast. And I don't take up a project if I'm not serious about it. Is that it's like an analogy, but it's a related point where I'll hear about so many people on our side, right, preaching about the importance of teaching our kids history. And then when I talk to them, they actually don't know very much about our history, right? And we can talk about how we defend it like hell against the fact that Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder, and he's my favorite president. And I love Thomas Jefferson. TJ is the man. But they don't even know that John Adams was an abolitionist.
I mean that's fair. He's a Hindu, so like, it's like that jab there over the Jefferson Bible.
Or that John Quincy Adams, his son, actually was the only U.S. president to go back to the U.S. Congress after serving as U.S. president for the cause of fighting for abolition, violated the gag rule by saying the word slavery, uses his own trial to actually make the case against the gag rule, gets it abolished, or that Abraham Lincoln was the person who actually carried him out of the Congress floor when he died, getting a stroke in the middle of a speech on the Congress floor. These are great stories of American history. And I just use that as an example where most conservatives I talk to about, well, we believe in our founding and we're not teaching our history anymore, have no clue about that story of American history. And so for me, I think our side has grown lazy. And I think that it's just, I'm not just going to call that out. It's part of what I'm trying to do on this podcast is get into the content beyond this. If you want standard conservative talking points, there's a lot of place to go. And like, I just get sick of saying what other people are saying. But if you want to cover ground that other people haven't covered, that's why I launched this thing. The first one with Ann Coulter we put out yesterday in Apple, Spotify, whatever it is. I'd encourage people to listen. I'm not in this as a business. It's not my principal objective. If I want to make money, there's other ways to do it. But I do think we need to elevate the quality of conversation in this country, and particularly on the right.
No, I think
so anyway, I love coming on with you because we get to do that. It's one of these rare spaces, and you keep doing what you're doing. And, I'll come back soon.
Absolutely. And, of course, John Hancock was not an adult film star. Most Americans need to learn that. We appreciate Vivek. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that you have the testicular fortitude to say these things and the ability to articulate it well. I think you've moved a lot of people towards your position. We appreciate it, brother. Be well.
Thank you, man. Take care.
All right. Nice. That was a good interview. I actually agreed with Stephen Crowder more on there than I thought I would, because I left him because I thought it was kind of radical, and there are some things he still said that I disagreed with, but it was actually a pretty reasonable discussion. I don't think it was a debate as heated as the title insinuated. That was a little bit of clickbait, but Vivek Ramaswamy is a great dude, and I hope that he ends up running for president again because I think he deserves that seat